Before recording MIDI, there are several steps you'll need to complete to get ready. So let's take a look at how to prepare to record MIDI in Ableton. So I've got a default set open, and let's go ahead and hit our Tab key to move over to Arrangement View where we've been working. Now, the first thing I would normally do when I'm working with a part would be to create a track. Since we're in the default set, we've already got 4 empty tracks to work with, but let me just get some of these out of the way. I'm just going to select the nameplate on that track and hit my delete key and get rid of a few of those. I can't actually get rid of that last one because we always have to have at least one track in an Ableton Live set. But now that we've got a little more room to work, let's go ahead and let's create some tracks. And we can do that by going up to the Create menu and choosing one of these first options here, Insert Audio Track, MIDI, or Return Track from the menu. And I'll go ahead and choose MIDI track. And then just to show you that there are other ways that you can do this, I'm going to move my cursor just below that bottom track here in Arrange View over in the track header area, and I'm going to right click, and in the contextual menu I get those same 3 options of Insert Audio, MIDI, or Return Track. Again, I can just choose one of those, and now we've got a 3rd track. So now that I've got tracks to work with, next thing I would do would be to load a preset or a device. So I've already gone into the Instruments category of the browser and into the Impulse folder, and I'm going to select this first preset and drag and drop it on the first track there. Now, I know that this is more than just an Impulse device because I see that we've got a rack here, and I know that because I'm looking at a rack macro on the left-hand side. But we're going to be working just with Impulse, and I'll let you know that Impulse is a simple drum machine or drum sample player, and we have 8 pads that we can use to trigger our drum parts. And these pads are mapped starting with middle C on your controller, and that would be C3. So the kick pad here would be C3, and then going up from there it would be the white keys. So this would be D3, E3, F3, and so on and so forth. So now that I know where these notes are located, I can go ahead and hit a key on my computer keyboard to make sure that I've got sound. I'll double check to make sure that the track is record enabled. And now if I play a note, I should hear something. All right, I didn't hear anything. I'm not seeing any signal in the meters on the rack or on the track. And also, there's nothing in the MIDI in indicator, which is up here in the upper right-hand corner. And that should light up when I hit my keyboard. And I don't see anything. So let's go into Preferences and let's check to see what's going on. Now that would be under the Options menu on a PC and obviously the Live menu on a Mac. So with that open, I'm going to go to the Link Tempo MIDI tab, and I'm going to look down here in the MIDI ports area and specifically for my keyboard and the checkbox under the track column. With that disabled, Ableton won't recognize or receive any MIDI note on messages from my controller. So I'll go ahead and enable that button. And now if I hit that middle C on my keyboard, I should hear the kick sound. Yeah, I hear it. I can see signal in the track. And if I look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the MIDI in indicator lighting up. Now, while I'm here, there's one other thing I want to fix. So I'm going to go to the Audio tab, and down in the latency area under buffer size, I notice that my buffer size setting is on the maximum setting, which is great for computer performance, but that will result in the most amount of system delay or latency. And when you're recording, you want to reduce that down to a lower setting. So I'll set that at 128 samples or thereabouts. And then when I'm done recording, I would come back and I would bump that up to one of these higher settings for editing and mixing. So let's put that on 128 and let me check my latency. Okay, that's good. That's going to work. All right. So one other setting that you should be aware of is the MIDI input device and channel. Now, if you're recording one track at a time, it doesn't really matter as long as you have the device set at all ends. By the way, if you're not seeing this column here in the track header, make sure you come down here into the Show Hide buttons and click the I/O button. So This first pop-up menu allows us to set the MIDI input device. And as I mentioned, it's on all ins or all inputs, meaning that it's going to recognize MIDI signal from any of the connected devices, from my computer keyboard down to my Novation keyboard and Novation launch control, any of those. But since I'm only recording one track at a time, I don't really care. Now, if I was recording on 2 tracks and I wanted to use 2 different controllers, one on each track, then I would come in and set this. Similarly, below that, I can indicate a specific channel, but I have to say that in recent years, I probably haven't changed this off of all channels. I can't even remember when I needed to change this. So I'll leave this on all channels. And next, let's check our tempo and metronome settings. So I'll go over here to the tempo field, and it's at the default 120. And if you want to change that, you can click in the field and drag up or down. If you want to go by fine increment, you can hold your shift key and you can see it changing by 1/10 of a BPM. You can also just select the field and type a value. Let's say I wanted this to be at 75.5. And now we've got that set. I just hit my return key to enter that. Over to the right of this, we can set a meter. So the first field will be for the number of beats in a measure, and the second one will be the rhythmic value of one beat. So right now we're at 4/4, which would be 4 beats in a measure with the quarter note being the beat. So I could set this to something like 6/8. Again, I'll hit my return key to enter that value. And now if I zoom in a little bit, we'll see that each measure has 6 beats in it. But let's go ahead and let's put that back at 4/4. So the next button over here is to activate the metronome. And if I click that and you see it's gold, we'll hear the metronome. Now, next to that, there's a drop-down menu for the preferences for the metronome. So we can choose a count in. If it's a slower tempo, probably 1 bar is enough. If it's a faster tempo, oftentimes you'll want to go to 2 bars. And then below that, we can choose a sound. And oftentimes I'll use just the click sound in the middle because I prefer that sound. But there's a little bit of a difference that I'll demonstrate. And so let's go with the classic so that we can hear. All right, so we're not hearing the click because we're not in record. And that's because I have this bottom option selected. So let me disable that. And I'll hit play again. So with classic selected, you can hear that there's an accented sound on beat 1 and a different sound on the others. If I go to click, we'll just get a single sound. And I much prefer that. Now, at a slower tempo, you may need to have a secondary rhythm in addition to the click on the beat. And so you can go into this rhythm area and you can choose something like maybe an 8th note or an 8th note triplet or a 16th note to give you a little bit more rhythmic information so that you can play in sync at that slower tempo. So if I put this on an 8th note triplet, we'll get 3 pulses per quarter note. And as I mentioned, we can also set the metronome to only play when we're in a recording pass. So we would click this, and if I go back into that menu, you'll see that there's a check mark next to that. And now we won't hear the click when we're just playing back a track, but we'll only hear it when the track is record enabled and we click the record button to go into record. All right, now that we've established a pre-recording routine, we're ready to start recording MIDI.